from the trace reports, a disproportionate number of those guns are traced back to a handful of suburban gun dealers. Most gun dealers in Illinois are good gun dealers who follow good business practices and aren't the source of guns that are used in crimes. But a handful, I think, clearly are being either willfully neglectful or worse in the way that they sell guns. It just doesn't make any sense to me that the average gun dealer would sell 3 guns that trace back to a crime, and a couple of them are selling 500 or 1,500 guns that are used in crimes. So what we're trying to do is provide a licensure at the state level for gun dealers, the same way we do for other professionals like barbers and dog groomers and other people that run businesses in Illinois. We're not asking much of those gun dealers. We're asking them to follow the best practices that most dealers already do, making sure that their employees are trained and have the right credentials. If you're running a store, to videotape the transaction, and to interact with local law enforcement so that they can use the information to track down the people who are responsible for putting the guns in the hands of criminals. My thinking on guns has evolved a great deal in my 15 years in Springfield. When I first got down there, I was willing to sponsor, the entire Mayor Daley package of anti-gun bills. But I came to realize a lot of them just don't make sense. They sound good, and it motivates their political sense, but it doesn't solve the problem, which is young people getting killed all across the city. But what I have come to realize is that somewhere between the gun manufacturer and the crime scene, somebody is pretending to be a law-abiding gun owner and they're not. So there's a dealer who's selling to people he or she shouldn't be selling to. There's someone who bought the guns as a straw purchaser to sell them or give them to criminals. Somewhere in that legitimate stream of commerce, somebody is not behaving the way we'd want them to. And it has been my hope that we could unify people, gun owners and folks who don't own guns, together to say, we respect the right to own guns, but can't we all work together to make sure the guns stay with the people who should have them and they're not sold to criminals? So, Kathy, did you want to add anything? And then I know that we've asked Evan to sort out the questions about the gun dealer license.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to talk about the trailer bill that we have on this, because through a lot of the interaction we saw that there were some things that needed to be fixed from the original bill, or at least taken into consideration. And one of the big criticisms that we did hear, which was a very legitimate criticism, was we don't want to put small businesses out of business just because they have to have another license. So what we did was we put together a trailer bill, and in this trailer bill there's 2 components to it. Number 1, it gives the businesses 5 years to comply with any building or structural changes they need to have. If they need to install a security system, to have their guns in a locked security area, that most of them already have it, but to give them time to do that, to set up a surveillance system, and giving them time. So we put in a time frame, giving them 5 years to comply with that. We also knew that the cost of the license was of concern for some dealers. And so what we did was, in this other bill, we put in the maximum cost of the license would be $1,000 for a 5-year license, which breaks down to $200 a year. We felt $200 a year was not going to put any business out of business. And so that was the thing that we did take back from a lot of the conversations that we had with people from both sides of the issue, and this was something that we felt would be a good compromise to do that, still taking care of one of the main issues we have. Also, know that this is not recreating the wheel. There are 17 states that already have this in law, and those 17 states have shown statistically that they have reduced the number of gun crimes that are in those states without taking away anybody's guns that is lawfully owned. So with that, we'll take any questions.
Oh, let me first introduce myself. My name is Evan Summers. I'm the village manager for the village of Bensenville. Learning to be a village manager in school, they don't teach you how to moderate these type of conversations, so bear with me on this. We do have numerous questions on the gun bill, both for and against. We also have some other questions that are just kind of all over the place, so we want to mix those in.
We can tackle the gun questions before, and then we'll do
Let's do that. One of the most common gun questions, we've got about 6 or 7 of these. Why would you want to duplicate licensing when the federal government already licenses?
So the federal government does license, but it's not the kind of licensure you get at the state level. So the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms regulates gun dealers, but there are 24 agents that have responsibility for all of Illinois, all 2,400 gun dealers, plus Northern Indiana. They visit the gun dealers once every 2 or 3 years. The check that they use is in my view, not that exacting. Until recently, the federal government didn't even permit the digitization of records, so everything is done on paper, or it had been. It doesn't allow local law enforcement the tools to deal with patterns where a lot of guns are being traced back to a particular gun dealer. What's going on there? Who are you selling to? Can we look at it at the macro level, not just this gun came in and this gun went out? There's been a real reluctance and a legal impediment to sharing information from the federal government with state law enforcement, which is a problem as you try to crack down on illegal guns.
Okay, we got 3 questions related to big box stores and why they're left exempt from this bill, and does this bill try to hurt small business owners?
Well, part of the reason that the big box stores were exempt in it was that is not where the red flags are coming from. When we do the trace reports, we don't see the time to crime from gun sales at the big box stores being so short. It's the small dealers that we're having the problem with. So in the most recent report that just came out just a few weeks ago really confirms that. In fact, unfortunately, the top gun dealer happens to be in my district in Melrose Park right now that has the shortest time to crime on there, which 10 years ago, last time they had it, he was not even on the list as a problem, and now that store has skyrocketed. So it's something that we are seeing that it's actually the big stores have the most to lose, so they are the most diligent to make sure that they don't have this problem, and that's basically the reason we exempted them.
Well,
It's a little bit more.
I want to point out, we're not exempting the big box stores by name or by size. We're exempting two classes. We're exempting really small dealers, those who don't sell more than 10 guns a year, and we're exempting dealers for whom gun sales is a small percentage of their overall business, if it's less than 10% of the business. So that coincidentally would exempt some of the big box stores, but not necessarily all of them, especially if they're doing a disproportionate amount of gun sales relative to the other things that they sell. And my understanding is that some of the sports big box stores may well be covered. So it's not that we're exempting big box stores because of any reason for that. Kathy's right. The evidence doesn't show many guns traced back to the Walmarts of the world. It's the mid-sized dealers that are doing a disproportionate amount of gun sales that end up being used in crimes.
All right, this one's more of an esoteric question. How do we balance our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness with the right to bear arms? What does your bill do to promote public safety? That was esoteric.
Well, look, we're wrestling with an enormous problem. This bill won't solve all of it. Of the guns recovered in crimes, 40% come from Illinois gun dealers and 60% come from out-of-state guns. About the gun dealers here in Illinois. This shouldn't impact the folks that are following the law, but I hope it will impact those who are being careless or negligent with whom they sell guns to. But it is a balance, and I like to read the entire Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms will not be infringed. That first clause means something to me. I think we have a responsibility to regulate this in a responsible way. This bill doesn't do anything to keep law-abiding gun owners from having guns or from buying guns. It just doesn't. It doesn't limit how many guns you can have. It doesn't limit how many guns you can buy at a time. It just says if you're going to be in the business, in the commercial pursuit of selling guns, you have to be licensed with the state. It's a relatively modest licensure scheme compared to some others, and it would just give us the tools to try to track down and find that balance for public safety.
So about 4 questions here. They're inquiring on what's next for the gun dealer licensing initiative with the bill itself.
So the status of the bill right now is it is on 3rd reading for the House. It has passed through committees in both the House and the Senate, and it passed through the Senate with a majority vote, so it is now in the House. We are waiting in the House until we have the appropriate number of yes votes. We need to have at least 60 votes. We are very close to that, but I have no intention of calling the bill until we are successful with at least 60 votes. And so as soon as we have that, we'll be calling the bill for a vote. We are continuing to talk to members that are undecided. It certainly is a cultural thing. Northern and southern parts of the state make a big difference on the thoughts on things with that. And it's an educational thing as we continue to educate the members as to what this bill actually does, counteracting a lot of the misinformation that continues to come out. So as soon as we have 60 votes, we'll be calling it for a vote.
Okay. This one kind of goes, I think you may have already touched on this. Is there any good reason to exempt gun dealers from licensing when 1.6 million must be licensed in their jobs? Licensing is a nuisance, but not a hardship. Have you heard any good reasons why they should be exempt?
I think that says it exactly right. And we license hair braiders and beauticians and nail salons. There's no reason not to have to do a state license of this. The biggest argument we get is that it's a duplicative license, but it's really not, because as Senator Harmon stated, the federal license, many people get an FFL that are not actually even gun dealers. It's sort of like having your ARP card. You get discounts for it. You can get discounts for purchasing guns and things like that. So it's really only looking at those that are gun dealers that sell more than 10 guns a year. Then that's where we're really making sure that we have them follow best business practices. This is something that's not in the guidelines for an FFL. It's much more open to getting that, and this would make sure that we have those shops following best business practices.
Okay, trying to keep all these straight here.
Shows a significant decrease in shootings. I don't have it in front of me, but
60% less gun crimes.
60% less gun crime.
Gun crimes is the statistics. It's hard to say how many lives will be saved, but let's put it this way: if it's your son or daughter or granddaughter or your spouse's life, that's all it takes is just one life to be saved. So it's really not fair to say how many lives will be saved. We just know that in 17 states that have enacted this, it has been successful in reducing gun crimes. Consequently, it also has reduced gun deaths.
So, going into that, other than this bill, what else do you think can be done to reduce gun violence in Illinois?
Well, the biggest thing is to increase our mental health care that we have to have throughout the state. I mean, there's no doubt anybody that does horrific gun crimes has a mental health issue, and unfortunately the state of Illinois has, over the last few years, reduced the amount of money that they are putting into mental health and mental health care. So there's no doubt that is something totally different than what we're looking at, but that is something that I think that is something that everybody agrees that we need to increase our care in mental health issues.
It's an enormously complicated problem. We all pay attention when there's a mass shooting. Las Vegas got everyone's attention. We started talking about bump stocks, something most of us never knew existed. But that's a reactionary thing, right? The bump stocks weren't the root cause of it. They certainly accelerated the pace of the killing. But what bothers me is that there's a mass shooting every week in my district, but it just happens one at a time. And we can't stand for that. If you look at the neighborhoods, the city of Chicago, frankly, is much safer than it was when I was a kid. But in a couple of neighborhoods, it is just profoundly violent. It's decades of intentional disinvestment. It's neglect of the schools. It's neglect of the economy. We have to make a real investment in trying to fix that. but we often hear, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? But guns amplify the violence, whether it's mental illness or it's a criminal. If they had a baseball bat or a knife, you can't kill somebody across the street. Guns amplify the problems of mental health. Guns amplify what would otherwise be petty violence between teenagers. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and if it's used in the wrong way by the wrong people, it has devastating, fatal consequences.
I've got several questions here related to straw sales, both for and against. Can you touch on if this bill covers straw sales, and if straw sales are already illegal, how does this bill make it more illegal?
Well, one of the components of the gun dealer licensing is to educate all of the employees of the gun dealership as to what is a straw sale and to recognize it. And that right there, hopefully, since we know that the initial owner of the shop, and we know that both the NRA and the ISRA do a lot of public statements against straw sales, this is just another level and another layer to go and help educate the owners and the employees of the gun dealer shops to recognize those straw sales and to stop them. I'm going to go into one other thing that I know is probably right in on that other question, and it's gotten to my attention over the last 2 weeks that there were 2 cases where somebody was arrested for straw sales and the judges let them off with probation. That has to stop. If we're finding these straw purchasers, we need to hold them accountable. A slap on the wrist is not enough to do it. We need to make sure we stop them. It does us no good to go and arrest them and then let them off, because more than likely they're going to do it again, and we need to stop that from happening.
And that actually dovetails with the earlier question. When you and I were out talking with the State Rifle Association chapter out in West Chicago, we had a long discussion about cracking down on the criminals who are using guns. We did pass a bill this year, or last year in Springfield, that increases the penalties for repeat offenders who habitually use guns. It was controversial. It was opposed by some folks who thought it was just an excuse to put more black and brown people in jail. But we tried to cue that balance and make sure that the folks who have had prior gun convictions and are convicted again don't get a get-out-of-jail-free card. If we can, if they are a danger to society and they are convicted of a felony, they can do some time in jail, and at least we'll be safer when they're not on the streets.
All right. With the polling in the suburbs so strong in favor of gun dealer licensing, why do so many of your colleagues in Springfield oppose Senate Bill 1657?
I give the NRA and the State Rifle Association a lot of credit for their political prowess. They are very good at mobilizing people in Illinois, and they are very good at convincing, especially suburban Republicans who really are part of the metropolitan Chicagoland area, to vote their way. I've been really impressed with the counterinsurgency here, the Moms Demand Action, and some other groups who, for the first time, really are mobilizing the same kind of grassroots effort. But the problem is that there should be middle ground. I was the sponsor for many years of a provision that would require gun owners to report lost and stolen guns. It finally became law as a part of the concealed carry legalization. Why in the world would the NRA be opposed to gun owners reporting a gun that's lost or stolen? I understand that it's a tool and you have a right to own it, but don't you have a responsibility if your gun goes missing to tell the police that my gun was stolen? I just don't understand why we can't work together and find some ways to protect each other. If my car is stolen, I'm going to report it stolen. But if your gun's stolen, what? I don't understand why the NRA was opposed to this. It made no sense to me. There is middle ground here, but we are so dug into our trenches too often, and we end up fighting some of the wrong fights. I still am convinced that there is a way that we could all work together. And frankly, I think an awful lot of gun owners in Illinois agree with things like that, and we've heard from gun owners who agree wholeheartedly with gun dealer licensing.
And I think you may have touched on this, Representative, but I'm going to ask it again for clarification purposes. Why in the proposed law are there no defined fees, but left for a board to later decide?
Well, most of the laws that we propose get defined and filled out in the Rules Committee or by the agency that is responsible for it. So it's nothing new on that. It's just one of the ways it goes. It also puts the experts in charge of making the rules that actually work for that situation. I would not know how to run a gun shop, so why would I be making all of the rules for it? We would ask the licensing institutions to be able to do that, because they're the ones that are going to have to enforce those laws, and that's where it goes through press. And the trailer bill, we put the trailer bill in there specifically to give them some guidance on it, so that we didn't have it come through. You know, there was a lot of talk at one point that in order to have this license be cost neutral, we were going to have a $10,000 license. Well, that would be absolutely ridiculous to have to do that. And so that's why we did put the trailer bill in place, to give the Rules Committee some guidelines in which we expect them to be able to work.
This question is related to trace reports. The state of Illinois uses trace reports to track gun sales. Do we get any information from surrounding states on those, on similar reports? I think they're trying to ask, the gun is sold in Indiana and the crime is committed in Illinois.
Well, yeah, we certainly know, and that's how we know that more than 60% of the guns that are traced back to crimes are bought and sold outside of our state, and that's one of the biggest problems. And obviously we know that the majority of the crime guns, certainly the ones that are used in Chicago, come from Indiana, Missouri, and Mississippi. Those are the three states that are the biggest culprits on it. And we cannot control those laws in those states, and that's part of the problem. They have different procedures that they go through, and so while we can control is what we do in the state of Illinois.
All right, this question relates to semi-automatic weapons. What is the status of statewide or national semi-automatic weapons that are considered assault weapons?
Sure. So,
the definition
yeah,
is part of
you know, the federal government in the 1990s banned assault weapons. The fact is that it was very easy for the manufacturers to modify the design so that they weren't classified as assault weapons. You know, again, that it gets back to my point when I think we're fighting the wrong fights. I have come to appreciate that most folks who served in the military are very familiar with the AR-15. That's the standard rifle, right? And that's the tool that they want to have when they're in retirement. It looks like a scary gun to me, but I didn't serve in the military, so I don't have that firsthand familiarity. I'm not sure that we should be focused on taking that particular gun off the street when there's 18 others that can do just as much damage. I think we do have to look at modifications to turn semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons. I think that's a problem. But I think most of all, we just have to make sure that guns stay with law-abiding gun owners and they aren't sold or handed off to folks who are going to use them to hurt us in crimes.
Currently, dealers are subject to no-notice ATF inspections. Does this new state bill have similar provisions, and if so, how does the state plan to pay for those inspectors?
I think it would allow local police to visit the gun dealers with a little bit more comfort and authority that they have the ability to do that. The Department of Professional Regulation regulates a whole lot of professions, and they do that now, and they complain every time that we ask them to regulate anyone that they don't have the money to do it, but they find a way to do it because that's what the department does. The licensing fee, however modest it may be, would pay for a big chunk of that operation, just as it does with every other profession that we regulate.
All right, we're running through these rather quickly. I appreciate the lightning round that we're going through. Why isn't there any gun safety training requirement provided in your bill?
Because we're not focusing on the gun owner. That's where the gun safety would be, on the gun owner. And there are, every year there's talk about bringing that up, and there's a lot of talk about that. Certainly, in order to get a concealed carry license, you have to go through gun safety regulations. That is part of that, and I was part of the group that wrote that. But this is not where we're looking at. We're not looking at the gun owner. We're looking at the gun dealer, the person that sells you the gun. I guess we're assuming that the person that works in a gun shop knows how to shoot a gun and can give proficient information to the gun purchaser, so.
All right, this will probably be our last question on gun control or that topic. It's somewhat of a summary question. Why are you introducing new gun control legislation when those in positions of authority are inconsistently applying the current laws already on the books? This only seeks to hurt those who are decent, law-abiding citizens, as new guns are uniquely targeting and restricting those who obey the law.
This is not new.
No.
We've been working it for.
This is some, I've been the sponsor of this bill for 15 years. This is the first time I've been able to pass it out of the Senate. So it's not new. But this is just sort of the nature of government. We pass laws. Most people follow them. Some people don't. We try to set up a system of responsibility for the people who don't. But it's the tools to try to ensure uniform behavior according to the norms that we think are appropriate for our society. Criminals, by definition, don't follow the laws. That's why they're criminals. But that doesn't mean we should eliminate laws because criminals break them. We should be smarter when we can. But there's, in my view, nothing wrong with setting out reasonable expectations for people doing business in Illinois who sell a product that can be very dangerous if misused or used by the wrong people. Well, why don't we then just turn to our short presentation on what's going on in the state and with the state budget.
Sorry, what about the questions that weren't read? What happened to those questions?
The ones that are not regarding guns?
The
We're
ones that
gonna
are
get those.
regarding guns that were not read.
I tried to summarize the questions as best I can. Obviously, we're not going to be able to ask each of these individually, so we tried to combine questions.
So you were picking and choosing which questions would be
I'm
read?
monitoring the conversation, that's correct.
Was there a question that you submitted that wasn't answered?
Yeah, I was more concerned about the human right aspect of the video recording.
That
in the
question,
back.
actually, I still have that one out here, so that's.
This is my favorite. How many folks think that we're going to be videotaping bathrooms?
It's not what you think, it's what will be done.
No, it's not.
No, it won't.
How many gun dealers sell guns in their bathrooms?
That's not the point, that's not
It is
the point.
exactly the point.
You're-
It is exactly the point.
It had, the law specifically states videotaping at the point of sale.
No, it doesn't. No, it
says
doesn't.
where the transactions are happening or where the guns are stored.
And everywhere else, in every corner of the store.
No, it doesn't. And we're not
Could
taping.
you read that?
And we're
Could
not.
you read the bill?
Yes, I can.
Lord, he answered the
We're
question.
not-
Would you stop?
Let me say
asking him?
categorically, we are not videotaping in bathrooms. That is a lie perpetuated by people who don't like the bill. We are not, it does not say it, Todd.
It does. It says
Read it.
any place that a firearm is handled or carried.
Right, read it out
If you
loud.
don't carry a gun, you don't take it off and go to the bathroom. And if you hand, you
Todd,
have
is
to
it a gun that the gun dealer has?
Huh?
Is it a gun that the dealer has in
It
his
says-
inventory?
It says any place. It doesn't say just inventory. Your
Well,
bill
you know
says
what?
Any place a firearm is stored, handled, sold, transferred, or
Todd,
carried.
shut up.
I
Oh
will
my
put
God,
in the new
please.
trailer bill with the exception of bathrooms. So all of our NRA and ISRA friends will be happy. I will make sure that we clarify, we will not have videotaping in bathrooms, okay?
This is why we don't get stuff done in Springfield.
Exactly.
This is why. It is preposterous to think that we want to videotape people in
That is
bathrooms as a
stupid.
part of
Then
the
write
gun
it
dealer
down.
license.
Write it all
Well,
It
down.
it's
doesn't
the same
say that.
price.
It doesn't say that, and for him to get up and say that's what it says to get you guys all riled up is just more of the same. Why can't we work together? Do you want people getting shot in the streets?
Don't talk about videotaping.
Like
He's
my
videotaping
nephew,
me right now. Let me get out my
because
camera.
they're gonna already make a tremendous amount of money selling all these guns, okay,
Just
and
get
they
out my
don't care.
camera right now.
So let's be clear, we'll put it in the trailer bill that no one will be videotaped in bathrooms unless the gun dealers decide that's where they're going to keep their inventory. Were there other questions that we didn't get to?
I believe I summarized them all as best I can.
Okay. Then we're gonna go on to the overall general
Yes.
questions about what's going on with the state, and then we'll take those questions after we do a very brief overview. Senator Harmon has some stuff up here about budget and some key bills that did get passed this last spring.
So, did anyone hear we have a state budget?
Yeah.
For the first time in 2.5 years, we have a state budget that